We've always known the education system was never created to be equal.
Your thoughts on providing the educators with leadership training and coaching?
We kind of treat it like a politician, right? Like, so have all your data, get it to people, and then open your door to be able to answer questions.
How should men support these female leaders or females that want to become leaders? Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of the RK Leadership Podcast, where we empower tomorrow's leaders through sharing of knowledge, experience, and inspiring stories. I'm your host, Rob Cameronport, and my special guest today is Melissa Bloom, and she's the CEO and founder of Expanse Strategists. Welcome aboard, Melissa.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. I'm excited to have you here today. And again, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. And why don't we start by, jumping right in. If you can take us back on your journey and how you got to leadership and what got you interested in leadership.
Sure. I started off as a public education teacher in high school. And in education, there's sort of this ladder that you follow if you want to make any money at all, which is you get your administrative degree and you just kind of keep going. So I got my administrative degree and didn't really know what I wanted to do with it. Took some time, did some consulting, and was asked to go back to the high school that I was at as an assistant principal. Did that for a few years, and then I got called into the superintendent's office, which is never good, right? And was told that I would be the principal the following year. And I was like, oh, no, I'm fine. I'm good where I am. I've got this. And they're like, no, you're going to be the principal and it'll be all right. So it was fine. So I did that for 4 years and discovered that I really loved leading other people, and moved through the ranks that way, and ended up in corporate education sector. And I just really have a passion for bringing people together around a common goal and interest, which when I think of leadership, that's really what I think about, not being, the boss.
Nice. Awesome. So what do you think is the hardest part, Melissa, of actually bringing people together and having them to kind of envision what you're visioning and, the path that you want to take them?
Yeah. So my roles have been in taking a founder's vision and helping to, get the leadership team and the employees circled around that vision, not necessarily mine. And what I've found is that when someone starts a company, you start a company and you're full of passion for that particular thing that you started the company for, whatever your mission is. And then as the company grows, that mission gets sort of half-lifed as you hire people, just because you can't talk about it all day long like you used to. And so I've found that when working with leadership teams, they really need to understand their connection to that mission and be able to say how they contribute to it. And once I'm able to help them do that, it's really this transformation of buy-in and supporting each other to reach that goal.
That's right, and I think it's that's the most important piece is that buy-in. So what do you do in case when you've got people that resist to that buy-in and they're very difficult to change their mindset? How do you deal with those people?
So I got asked this question like 6 years ago when I was interviewing for a superintendent position, and I just blatantly said, well, you don't have to keep everybody on the bus. And I didn't get the job. I suspect that wasn't the right answer, but it is the right answer. I think there is a certain amount of helping people understand the role that they're in and their responsibilities, and then if it's not for them, it's not for them, and no love lost. But at the end of the day, you've got to have a leadership team that supports the mission of the company and is willing to move that forward.
That's right. No, absolutely. I totally agree with that. So, Melissa, what did you learn about the education industry, the educational industry, and what was the biggest surprise for you?
Okay, sure. So coming out of public education into the private sector of education was a big learning curve. The whole ed sector is very different if you've never worked in it. The finances are different, the sales cycles are different, and I didn't ever really think about sales cycles. I purchased technology and whatnot, but I don't know, it was just my world. So moving into corporate, I really had to readjust my my confidence in being able to contribute to the company, but also being very willing to learn and take in what I didn't know. And when you're at the top of when you're at the top of a company prior to that, like I was, coming in with the mindset that you're not going to know half of what you probably feel like you should know, that's kind of a hard pill to swallow. And it was definitely a humble pill. But I found that people were very willing to assist and I was able to contribute. And over time, that was very valuable.
Awesome. So you talked about confidence, and I know
Yeah.
the importance of confidence when you are in a leadership position. You want to get to a leadership position. How did you determine, that factor that you lack that confidence, and what did you do to gain that confidence?
Hmm. Sure. I've always been pretty I've always been somebody who is happy to go and like study and brush up on what I'm not particularly well versed in. And so for example, I had never led a sales team before,
Mhm.
and I didn't go into that with the sales team saying like, "Hey, I'm in charge, guys. You need to do it," because I didn't know. So I did a lot of listening. I did a lot of questioning, just to help myself understand. But the questions also were very reflective for the team, and we built a very trusting relationship where I was able to hold people accountable, but I didn't necessarily need to be able to do their job. You know what I mean? We had to fill a CFO position at one point in time, and so I stepped into that, and I'd never been a CFO before. So I went hardcore, like, studying and like just doing things myself until I was very confident in what I was presenting. Um, and a lot of that is just really common in small businesses. And I wouldn't trade that experience for the world because I got so much exposure out of that.
That's right. And I love that how you were put in an uncomfortable situation, leading a sales team without having that background. So I this is actually a controversial topic for some because
Sure.
the industry I kind of came up in, the engineering industry, they're very big on having leadership with specific knowledge and understanding of that realm. So if
Hmm.
you have to understand that particular engineering aspect of things, and I was always against that because to me a leader is not the subject matter expert. So what would your advice be to folks getting into leadership that don't have a background in the people that they're leading?
Sure. My position started in corporate as a subject matter expert and sort of transitioned as I grew with the company into
Mhm.
leadership. So my advice has always been, and it was something I said to my team, not the sales team, but my leadership team, was to just ask a lot of questions. If you recognize that that you don't feel confident in a particular area, then that's an area to delve into and do more um, in-depth research or study. I'm a huge advocate for go get more education, you know. And I was fortunate enough to have a CEO who invested in that as well. And so about 2 years ago, I went through a business certification program through Vanderbilt University, and that was great. And I encouraged other people to do, similar things. Plus, there's so many free options now, online. There is no excuse to not be able to brush up on information at this point.
Absolutely. So, Melissa, I want to talk about. I'm really interested in the educational industry, and to me, there's a lot of gaps from a leadership perspective,
Mm-hmm.
and we've got our kids coming through the system, and what are they learning in that sense of like leadership?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think is lacking in the educational system in terms of leadership, and how can we fix this?
Well, it's a hard question because I think what I've learned having been in the seat of the educators and then, being in a corporate position to serve education is what we've always known. The education system was never created to be equal for all students. And unfortunately, we've not had the ability, for whatever reason, to completely overhaul that system so that it is equitable for all students. And that's really our charge, is to, stop doing the things that don't serve all kids, stop blaming the kids and the community, and to be able to come at that from a completely different perspective. And I don't blame the educators for that. There's a lot of outside forces that contribute to the way that we do education in this country, and educators have one of the hardest jobs. It's hands down. Speaking from experience, they do the best that they can, but we outside of education need to do a better job in providing assistance and innovation around what education could look like that serves all kids.
That's right. And do you think the educators are kind of set up for failure, from the get-go?
In a way, yes. I've worked with districts that are very, very ahead of the curve, and I've worked with districts that are really kind of still suffering the results of many years before them. But that's a hard question. I would say that, what's that again? This is one you're going to cut.
I was asking, I was saying that, are they set up for
For failure. Yeah. I don't think the teachers are not, and the educators are necessarily set up for failure, but I do think that they have a very difficult, path in front of them in order to change a system. It's very hard to change a system. And we need more than one or two shiny people that are willing to push against the grain in a school or a district to be able to do that. And we haven't really made that safe for teachers and educators to do in this country.
What are your thoughts on providing the educators with leadership training and coaching?
I think that's great. Unfortunately, educators get bombarded a lot by training and coaching.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I myself had sort of this like, oh, it's another thing. Like, it's another year, it's another thing. I really feel like we owe it to educators to be able to say, hey, we've been hearing what you've been saying. We understand. We're not trying to shove something else down your throats. This will benefit you. This will benefit the kids, and allow them that opportunity to kind of come into it organically and genuinely, because they're so used to just having things put upon them.
Forced to.
Absolutely.
Yes. So, Melissa, I want you to take me back to, you and I talked about when you first applied outside of your industry. What was the tipping point for you, and what made you do that?
Well, at that point in time, I really had nowhere to go in terms of upward mobility in my district. And I had just earned my doctorate and, was kind of thinking, what else can I do? And I applied to all sorts of positions that now I understand probably it was no chance for some of those. But I was so excited to be brought on in the position that I was at that time, was working with Dr. Marzano on teacher evaluation and kind of like starstruck. So that just was a perfect opportunity to do, to kind of bridge something that I'd already was very familiar with in the district. And from there, I just kind of kept getting little nibbles of additional experience and elevating my own leadership.
Nice. Excellent. So you talked about also scaling an organization where they had the highest revenue they've ever had.
Yes.
What do you believe contributed to your success in doing so?
Well, first of all, I was able to use a model that was proven. We brought in Les McEwen, who wrote Predictable Success, and he trained the leadership team on how to actually understand what you're doing, what you don't need to be doing, what you need to be doing next, how to work together to create a foundation that supports growth. And that was very life-changing for the organization. But I also think, I didn't have any preconceived notions that this couldn't be done. Why can't it? This sounds great. Yes, we can all get on the same page and do this work. And that was during the pandemic even. So call it rose-colored glasses or naivety, I don't know. But, I think that there was a benefit in not having been completely phased by the corporate world at that point. And, we're all here for kids. So let's just do it.
That's right. That's right. And do you still use that model today
Yes.
in your work?
Yes. When I launched Expanse Strategists, I was able to license the model from Predictable Success, and which I am thrilled to be able to offer to my clients.
Awesome. And why should organizations use that model that you have?
Sure. It's proven to work, first of all, but also it really takes this this holistic approach to growth and scaling that includes where the founder and CEO currently is, which is so important because they started the company and there's these life cycle changes and you have to sort of wear a different hat as a company grows. And a lot of models sort of ignore that. And so this model honors the work, obviously, that the founder has put into place, and then elevates them to be able to do innovation, which is necessary when you're a growing company. But on top of that, it bands the leadership team and then the management to be able to carry out the tasks and the actions and the strategies that need to happen in the business so that the founder can actually be that thought leader and innovator, which you have to have if you're going to grow a company. You can't just sit on the same thing that you've been doing for 20 years.
That's right. Now, it's interesting, you made the transition to, from the educational world to the corporate world.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think some of those transferable skills that you took from the educational system or, your placement in there to the corporate world, what
Sure.
were some of those skills that were transferred?
I have talked to teachers and administrators about transferring, from public education to corporate world, and everything is transferable. It's just in the way that you word it. You've got 4,000 high school students and 200 faculty. I know how to run, a leadership team and make sure people are, doing what they're supposed to be doing. PR, any principal does PR. You've got they're fabulous with any sort of emergency. Talk about having to make decisions truly that are life or death. in a split second. Educators know how to do that. They're also people. They're people, right? Like they really, most of them have empathy and they want the best for what other people are doing and growing, and they encourage that growth, but they're also used to having very high standards. So, I would hire an educator any day. I'd much rather train the skills than the mindset.
Interesting. So, Melissa, you talked about decision making. How important is it to make decisions as a leader, and how would you make a decision if you had to? Walk us through that process that you take to make a decision.
Sure. I actually use sort of two different frameworks that I coach on. And so if I'm working with a team, the framework that I use is a 4D framework, and it's really intended to help lateral management make decisions that impact more than just one department, and to do it in a way that, we don't meet 40 times and still don't have the decision, right?
Yeah.
So it encourages people to have data from a single source of truth prior to a decision making. And then when we get into the decision making meeting, it's seriously no longer than an hour. So we present any questions on the data, we allow people to have some discussion and debate, and then we say, okay, it's time to decide. You're either deciding or you're deferring. And that was really a huge game changer for the organization, because you didn't have these meetings where it's like, oh, we were supposed to decide that a month ago. And then in the companies that I work with that are small organizations, they don't have leadership teams. It's a little bit different. So, it's reflective, sort of. Is what you're thinking about doing, is that going to have a positive impact on your sales? Is it going to have a positive impact on your clients? Can you support it systemically, at least to a minimal? And do you need to do it legally, really? So that's kind of how I approach decision making, depending on the size of the organization.
Okay, excellent. Now, if let's say you have a team under you, at any point, do you actually involve your team in obtaining feedback from them to kind of help your decision, or no?
Yeah, absolutely. So in that 4D model that I was referring to, I always sort of encouraged whomever it was that was bringing the question to the team to, kind of treat it like a politician, right? Like, so have all your data, get it to people, and then open your door to be able to answer questions, right? Like, we should get into that meeting, and you should know that you're good to go, right? If we hit defers and weren't able to move on because of the vote tally, or the most senior, whomever we decided was kind of the decision maker for that meeting, then we actually had a retro. So why didn't that pass? Why did you defer? Was it because you didn't have enough data? Was it because you didn't, there's always something. And the idea behind being able to make quick decisions as a team is that you can trust the data that's coming to you to make that decision.
Interesting. Now, you yourself personally having a master's and a PhD, would you say when it comes to decision making, you overthink or overanalyze certain things?
So one of the first steps that I do with a company is give their leadership team a leadership style analysis. So people that tend to overthink are processors. And that's just the way that's just their thing. And they're really great when you are growing a company. You need to put systems in place, right? They're going to be sure that you put the right systems in place. Yes. I'm actually not a processor. I'm a visionary synergist, which means that sometimes I like my operators to kind of help me get stuff, checked off. So no, I don't personally tend to do that, but that's a common, you're going to have somebody on your team who does that.
That's right. Again, I don't want to, it's not a stereotypical question because
No, I mean, that is true. That is a major leadership style, and you need it.
Yeah, because I know engineers are like that. They
Yes.
overanalyze everything to death.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's, you get into that analysis paralysis.
Yeah. And so when I work with teams, that's part of what we talk about is the makeup of the team and how different leadership styles gel or don't gel. And once we get to a growing company, having a synergist in place is really helpful because they can bridge those differences. Like, okay, well, we might be overthinking this a little bit. Let's look at it from this lens. So that you don't have people kind of pushing toward their outer bounds of their leadership styles.
Yes. And I really like the fact that, you talked about data, which I believe is very important. And not only that, single source of truth where
oh my gosh, yes,
systems pulling data from everywhere.
I know. And I every time I talk about this, I say, okay, you've all done this, even if you don't know it, right? Like you go to a meeting and you're going to look at sales data and you got 5 people and they all bring different data. And it's, it can be from the same system, but they're all looking at it differently. And it's all like, this is the data and everybody's holding true. You can't have that once you're trying to scale a company, and not everybody wins, but you've got to decide that this is the data and this is what it says.
That's right. And that's another decision that you make.
Yes.
You talked about empathy. So this is, it's very important to me in terms of leadership. What are your thoughts on empathy and leadership?
I think it's crucial. I think one of the biggest missing skills, if you will, in leadership would be that compassion and empathy piece, that emotional intelligence. I'm a little fascinated by the different generations, I will admit.
Yes.
And so I kind of think, as a Generation X person, we tend to be very, if you look at the research on it, we tend to be rule followers, but also empathetic. And I think the generations coming behind us have a little bit more empathy yet. But I do think that's important. I want people that I work with to be able to make mistakes that they can come back from, that they can learn from. And people they go through different things. And at the end of the day, if you can do your job, that's great. If you can't, let's talk about it. I think empathy is huge for retention.
That's right.
And culture.
Yes, absolutely. So here's $1 million question.
Mm-hmm.
How do you acquire that skill?
I don't think you can just read about it and do it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it is something that you pick up along the road of life. And it's in the reactions that you make when things don't go your way. And it's in the resolution of how you frame those. I'm always going to be harder on myself than I am with people on my team. So when I talk about empathy, I deserve a little bit more empathy for myself than I definitely put out for my team. But I'm a much more empathetic leader now than I was 20 years ago. And I've got more life experience behind me.
That's what I was going to ask next is, do you think it actually comes with not age, but the experiences you
I do, because I don't know how you establish empathy if you've not been in a position to need it. I think it's the disappointments in life that provide you the chance to grow that particular skill.
And that's what I believe too, Melissa, is, with the younger generation, wanting to get into leadership roles much faster than, we did. How do you train that? Right?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I think about training leaders, so I just said you can't do it from a book, and I don't think you can, but I think involving people that want to be leaders in the reality of what leadership is as early as possible is really important. Whether that's mentoring or shadowing, and allowing them the opportunity to have those reflective conversations in a safe space with a mentor, whoever it is. Perhaps they can be more empathetic than I was 20 years ago when I was told, like, hey, you don't smile the first semester, right? And I think that we've become a little bit more open to that. But onboarding is really important, and so is giving people the opportunity to try things that they want to try.
That's right. That's right. Awesome. So I want to move forward. Now you've been in the educational system, you dove into the corporate world, and at some point you said, I had enough of that. Again, why did you decide to leave the corporate world? And did you have any fears leaving it? And how did you overcome your fears?
I haven't necessarily overcome my fears yet. So. I left my position in October of 23, having had a lot of success in scaling the company, and they were in a really good spot. And I have always been someone who's wanted to have a bigger impact than I've had. And not in a way that is for me, right? So when I left education, I was able to have a bigger impact by working for a company that had international impact. And I left thinking, if I can help other education companies scale like we did at my prior company, they could be so much closer to their mission. And that would be great for all of society. I don't need my name attached to it, but it would be, that's kind of what I feel like I was put here to do. So it was scary. It's still scary because it's only been 5 months, and entrepreneurship is not for the weak of heart. It's been a learning experience.
Would you say that you've discovered what your purpose is in life?
I think so, actually. Now that you put it that way, I do think so. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. And what is your advice for people who want to make the same change, but again, either on the fence or they haven't developed that courage yet?
Mm-hmm. Well, I was thinking about this today. If I could do it all over again, and it wouldn't necessarily even be with the forethought of moving into a different type of role, but I think establishing your personal brand and what you stand for early is really important. And I didn't do that because I didn't know I should, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
And, when I think about social media, I was supporting my company, and you can still do that, but I wish I had spent more time talking about what I believed in and putting that out there so that people would feel connected to me. I'm a little on the back foot on that. Speaking your truth and just getting comfortable saying it out loud to other people. I mean, that would be a great head start.
Yes, I love it. Speaking your truth, be authentic.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Awesome. So, Melissa, I hear that you've also written a book.
I did.
Okay, so can you tell us a little bit more about your book?
Yeah, sure. So the book is Queen Bee Chronicles, and it's got a whole, additional subtitle. But the book, what I started the book thinking I really wanted to investigate why some women don't support other women in leadership roles. And I was doing research, and I ended up really having to pull in intersectionality and biases, which I didn't, at the time think I was going to do. So the book kind of became something completely different. So the book's done, and now it's really this exploration of not only why do women do that, but also how do these other forces of outside influence impact the way that we treat or support each other in the workplace.
So why do you think it is that women don't support each other?
There's a lot of reasons. I learned this. There are a lot of reasons. It can be because there is a fear of there's only so many women at the top. It can be because of a protection stance, the shell that people put upon themselves when they're used to not being treated equally. It can be because women are subscribing to, sort of the traditional leadership model, which I would say is sort of that white man type of model. But of course, it just is what it was, years ago. So there's a lot of reasons that people may do that, which was sort of the direction the book took that I wasn't expecting.
Now, have you had other females disagree with your points?
So when I sent the book to beta readers, it was interesting. I sent the book to beta readers, and I had four white women leaders, and I had four Black and brown women leaders. And the response from the white women leaders was like, oh my gosh, we didn't even know, like, this is great. And from the Black and brown leaders, it was like, this is like nothing new. This is the life that we lead. And they had some great suggestions for me in terms of going back and sort of, giving more justice to that particular lens, which was not, like I said, that wasn't in my original plan for the book. So that was kind of humbling. I was like, oh man, I knew this book was going to be terrible at first, but then I sort of took a step back and I was like, this is a great opportunity for not only me to learn, but to also share with other people that didn't, haven't had these life experiences. So yeah, it taught me a lot. I wouldn't say it was like bad feedback, but it was certainly the feedback I was looking for, which was, what do you see that I don't see?
That's right. Awesome. So I know, I believe we spoke about this prior to this podcast, and that was, why do you think there's a segregation between male and female leaders where, in my opinion, a leader is a leader, right? Just like an accountant is an accountant. We don't say a female accountant versus a male accountant. Why do we segregate leadership and, other things with respect to gender?
I'm not sure that we actually segregate it. I think there's this belief that if you're a part of a minority or underrepresented group in a particular area, that you would naturally be a cheerleader for other people. And so men have had it, when you think about leadership in corporate world, it up until, fairly recently, it always has been more predominantly male. It still is. And so it's not a separation or division, but there's this wonder, like, why aren't women supporting other women? And I sort of envisioned, these different islands, if you will, where different pockets of women representing different socioeconomic, different ethnic, different racial, like, everybody wants to have equal opportunity at leadership, but we've all got our own lens, our own issues that have been bestowed upon us, and we need to come together to say, okay, well, we need to support everybody, which includes men. That's to right. Do better what we know we should do now, because we've had the opportunity to live and learn.
So how is it that you think that, how should men support these female leaders, or, females that want to become leaders? How do men support that community and, again, remove that segregation in general? And, like you said, I like it. Yeah. Everyone do it, but come together and do it together.
I think it has a lot to do with just how we treat each other as humans. Being aware that sometimes we say things that are rooted in our own biases that we may not even, these micro biases. I think we need to be aware of those things, and the way that, and that is not just a man or a female issue, right? Like, if we stop putting people in buckets, then everybody would have a heck of a lot more opportunity. And so I think it's more about taking away. It is about doing more.
And it's interesting you talk about biases. I've been, playing with this idea in my head quite a bit, and I'm going to do a post one day about it. In terms of biases, I personally believe that biases do exist in the real world, and there's an unconscious bias that exists.
Yes.
So again, I'm not sure if you've seen, they've got this show called Love is Blind. And
I love that show. I can't believe I'm admitting that on here, but yes.
Do you think like interviews should be done that way, where you don't get to see the other person?
That's a great question. I don't know. I've wondered that though, because I've participated and I've held interviews in both where, maybe they've submitted a video or they don't. As I've gotten older and I'm approaching that like older woman status that, it's like protected. I've wondered that, but I really, at the end of the day, I just really feel like people should be able to speak openly and honestly. And the other thing is, as leaders, we need to be okay with hearing people say, hey, this is how I interpreted that. This is how I lived that. That's how I experienced it. And not just saying, oh, but that's not what I meant, right? Like, we've really got to get better in leadership in accepting that we don't necessarily represent everything that should be represented in the human, scope of treating other people fairly.
That's right. Excellent. All right, Melissa, before we wrap up the show, we come to a portion where I call it the rapid fire questions.
Okay.
So I've got some questions, and you can just answer the first thing that comes to your mind.
Okay.
And we'll move forward. What is the most important aspect of leadership that young leaders need to learn?
I'm going to go back to emotional intelligence.
Excellent. So what advice do you have for young women who have fear and self-doubt about becoming a leader in a male-dominated industry?
Find a mentor, find a sponsor who, has walked that path and is killing it.
Awesome. And how can leaders overcome imposter syndrome?
That's a great question. That's a hard question, actually, because I think I still face it, right? I think it's more about just finding confidence in yourself more often than not. I'm not sure you can completely eradicate imposter syndrome completely out of your life.
That's right. And tell us, where can people find Melissa?
I'm very active on LinkedIn. I'm trying to get more active on other social platforms, but LinkedIn is where you will find me mostly.
Awesome. Well, again, Melissa, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. I really appreciate your, sharing your experiences, your thoughts, and your knowledge. I think you've got a wealth of, wisdom that you shared with the audience. And for those who have any questions for Melissa, you either know where to find her, or you can put your questions below, and I'll make sure I'll pass it on to her.
Absolutely.
And as for the rest of folks watching, have yourself a great one, and we'll see you in the next podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.